Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese, and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm recording on Tharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording, to elders both past, present and emerging. Today we're talking about the real change experience, and this year I'm sharing a lot around not just frameworks, methods, different views around approaches, but I wanted to cover off the realities of when you're introducing change, and there might be some aspects that you are going to relate to in different ways. There might be some things that where you're lucky enough not to have that experience in some ways, but it's really important to not underestimate the effort and the energy that it takes to lead change, to influence for change, and to work in change. It does take an investment, it takes energy, and part of what we like to talk about is how you are aware of your personal energy, how you can ensure that it's not taking too much of a toll on you because of these realities, and because change isn't something where it is autocratic and that you say you want to do this and you want people to work a new way, and people essentially don't. So one of the fundamental principles obviously about change is that this is a people-oriented discipline, which is true. There are also technology considerations that you take into account to help with transitions and help with change in your organization. Understanding processes, understanding technology, understanding how the business works is really so that from the structure perspective, from the support perspective, that is all taken care of. Now let's talk about change and the reality of it, because you obviously have theory, but the reality is quite different. And a lot of the reality when it comes to change has to do with the experience. So I'm going to cover this off through 3 different lenses. And some you may be able to relate to because of the position that you hold in your organization or the role that you do when it comes to the change. And then for the other aspects that I talk about, potentially just be aware of the experience of whether it be those individuals, team members, that awareness around, and even for leaders around the change experience that they are subjected to or just will have to walk in lockstep with the change, that if you are aware of their scenarios and how they might be feeling, then empathy might be able to be felt for those who are in those roles. And I think that is one of the keys around being able to lead change sustainably, be able to influence for change and keep showing up in different ways for different changes and for different evolutions of change, is that concept of empathy and being able to walk in someone else's shoes. And in fact, the more you can do that or understand how to do that without it being to the detriment of your own energy or of yourself, the better you will be able to deal with change, to be able to navigate change and lead change in everything that you do. So the first person I want to talk about when it comes to changing the experience they have are those who are impacted by it. And so a team member, an individual in your business, a person who heads into work every day, who clocks on, clocks off in some ways, might be logs on, logs off. But essentially, when someone is coming from their home situation, and I do talk about the whole aspect, and currently it's in March 2026, we're at the end of March 2026, and there's a huge global economic impact happening as a result of the war against Iran, and the detrimental effects that might be happening psychologically, realistically for people at home who might be traveling into work. Their expenses are just going up. The cost of living is going up. Inflation is going up. And certainly in Australia, that is the case. Globally, I think everyone is starting to feel it with petrol prices. So people might be hearing this, seeing this, watching the news. So there could be a lot of anxiousness, stress being placed on people at home, and they're coming and walking through that door, and then a change is perceived to be forced onto them. There might be projects that they're working on where a lot of people are wanting their time and they can't seem to fit everything into a normal workday. So part of the change experience for an individual has to do with understanding the climate when it comes to change, but also the individual and the teams that are impacted. Now, through that individual's lens, they're stressed at home, cost of living's going up, a lot of negativity in the press. They're coming in to work, they need to participate in workshops. If time is not respected, if their input isn't heard, if they're providing feedback, if they're raising issues with their leader but it's not being acknowledged, if they're not seeing any progress when it comes to a change that's coming through for them around how their feedback has been taken on board, if there's no evidence of that, then pretty soon stress becomes aggression. And that cycle that sometimes people can go through at the individual level is why change leadership is important. And what I'm going to do is play out the two scenarios. One is where I'm not being heard, I'm providing feedback, I can't see anything changing as a result of my feedback. It seems like this change is just being forced on me, just like everything else in my life. Can you hear the emotion that starts to build as part of that? I'm now starting to get really annoyed. I'm angry. I'm going to raise my voice. I'm going to try and fight my way out of this potentially, if that's my instinct, or I'm going to shut down and I don't want to play anymore. In Australia, we'd say, I'm taking my stumps, I'm taking my bat, and I'm going home, which is our cricket analogy, but it's pretty much bat and ball, I'm taking it home. I don't want to play anymore. And so that's shut down. So there's kind of variations on this behavior that happens. And so that is a poorly managed, poorly led, not collaborative change. If there's a change coming and I'm attending workshops, I'm seeing that I'm being heard, I'm feeling comfortable about things. I may not like it and where it's headed, but I'm feeling comfortable because I'm being respected. And in a world where potentially people are feeling less and less respected because of these scenarios and because of things being out of their control, then I'm in the middle lane when it comes to the change. I'm not going to champion it, but I'm not going to detract from it. And I'm going to continue to participate. And so they're two pathways. The third is I'm actually driving a change. I am that collaborate, my input is I'm essentially helping and building the new process. I'm essentially building the new technology. I can see how this is going to be better for everyone. And so I'm a bit enthusiastic about it. I'm not only being listened to, but I'm getting a sense of ownership on this, which is great. And I'm going to talk about it with team members, and I'm in a great working group. And so I really enjoy going to that working group because everyone's working together. And it seems like we are making progress, which is great. We're getting good feedback from leadership. So I'm really enjoying this change process. The third lens. So think about for your change, what the individual would be saying about that change, the team member, the person who's impacted. Which expressions, what type of narrative would they hold against each of those changes? And as you go through change, dependent upon your approach, which is why I always talk about how important your approach is, because how you engage with people through this change process is going to have them walk down one of those pathways emotively, but also be able to contribute, collaborate, part of team, versus, okay, I'm being listened to, versus I'm not being listened to at all and nor respected. And so each of those is going to have a different response. So the real change experience when it comes to applying a framework, doing workshops, engaging when we talk about design and how well people have been engaged on design and that design element, it depends as a result of that which pathway the individuals will walk down. The second lens we're going to talk about is the change practitioner and the change manager. Now, if you're a change manager, and it's a bit ironic that they even call them change managers, because in all reality, a good change manager is a good change facilitator and a good change influencer. And so this is very much around a change manager's hands are always tied because of the stakeholders that they work with. And so therefore, to, I guess, untie those hands, they need to have the mindset of being an influencer. Now, dependent upon how well a change facilitator is working, again, the change journey is I'm building relationships. The first step any change facilitator needs to make is, I know I'm here to do a job and I'm going to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is ask questions to develop and establish my relationships and trust. And as part of that and being able to establish trust, I'm going to ask questions without judgment. Again, the way you approach this is where you're going to build trust or you're going to erode it. Now, if you're using a lot of time of your stakeholders, you want to be very collaborative in how you use that time. This is what I found out so far. I just want to validate this view with you. Is there anything else? Is there anyone else who I should speak to? I appreciate your time. I'll come back to you once I've started to develop a bit of a sense with all the stakeholders around the ideal change approach so that you're not wasting people's time. And part of when you're going into a session is know who you're speaking with and ensure that if there's any existing documents, any existing information that you've read it, that you're familiar with it, again, that's a respect piece. And at the beginning, that's at the very, very beginning, it's about trust and relationships. As you go through, it's about rhythms, connection, keeping people informed. And from a change perspective personally, like you see your own experience, you are going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. You're going to have times when you feel like you've got all the clarity and then something comes up and then all of a sudden all of that clarity changes. Or someone says something, and this happens often in many organizations, and I've had this many, many times. You've asked a question, can you tell me about how this this change impacts this team, that team, and what the change is, and then you play back that change in a pack, or partway through you find out some critical piece of information that no one thought that they needed to share with you, or that people forgot, or people didn't highlight to you, and then all of a sudden it changes the impact across all teams, or it scoops in a totally different team way of working process. And then you're having to adapt your change plan pretty fast. Go and engage another team, because there might be a small assumption you've made which has a huge impact on the change that you've been working on. And that's often a real life experience for many changes who go into organizations and just finding their feet, trying to understand and taking it at face value. So the real change experience is that concept of insatiable curiosity is something you need as a change facilitator to ask the questions. Now, if you go too far down, and so if you've asked questions every single forum, but you're not playing anything back, then there will be a perception that you're not doing anything. And so part of the change concept and getting what I say street credibility as a change practitioner is to be able to produce documents to play it back to validate. And by doing that, you're going to become clearer on your messaging, clearer on who needs to be engaged, and people see evidence of progress. And by seeing evidence of progress, it builds trust again. As I said, not every day is a good day when it comes to change. There could be stakeholders that you have a conversation with and you've totally missed the mark, and you need to be able to dust yourself off and recover from that pretty fast, because you never really get the luxury of time in change. And it's a journey. It's a marathon. It is not a sprint, even if something needs to be delivered really fast. Oftentimes people underestimate that you might have invested too much effort just to get to the go live, but then the real work starts when it comes to embedding. And because of the environment that you're in, your experience might be the type of washing machine experience that you're just getting thrown around, and you're really struggling to get clarity, you're really struggling to get traction, and everything's just reactive, and you might be buffeted by that a fair bit. So the real challenge from a change perspective is to be able to be centered in amongst the chaos. And to do that is that locus of control, understanding what I control, what others can control. And when you become the person who's in agony aunt, and if all you're doing is listening to stakeholders who are constantly running the project down or running other stakeholders down, you can get very distracted by that. And it's important that potentially at that time you start to refocus your energy on progress, moving things forward, focusing the conversation so that your change can actually get traction. With this concept of marathon, it does mean that you, as you're going through the change process, and if it's a longer term type of program or project, you need to ensure that you're taking care of your health through that time, and that you're also going to push some weeks, rest on other weeks, like just allow the flow to happen and not push too hard too often. The whole concept, and if I think about not just marathon, but I think about the Tour de France, is certain legs suit certain people, but also you don't always push every single time. It's a concept of team. Some team members will go and push in their space, and you sit back while that push is happening, and then respectfully, as you start heading towards a go live, it's about timing of activities and being able to give people a bit of airtime if they need it, versus you always needing to drive what you need. And that's the awareness and consciousness of being part of a team. So definitely from a change experience perspective, it's knowing when to push, but also knowing when to take a bit of a back seat, because it's someone else needs the stage, someone else needs to go and talk to stakeholders. And that if you're jumping in there all the time, then the real important work that might help manage risk, which you might be aware of, it may not happen because you're taking up the time of stakeholders. So you need to ensure that from a team perspective, engagement is linked and works. Else it will result in friction, it will result in conflict, it will result in others being annoyed and stakeholders being annoyed because they might have covered off with you things that essentially they should have been talking to a business analyst or a project manager about. So it's important as part of teaming that collectively you leverage the work that others do and not always have to go to stakeholders to ask the same questions. And that is part of the key around being able to be part of a team, which is always the path to a better change experience than being a lone wolf or being someone who is the be-all, end-all when it comes to change. You're also needing, from a change experience perspective, is knowing, as I said before, your go live is a milestone, but the real work of embedding, if the organisation is comfortable heading into that go live, it's after the launch happens that you need to be on. And if you've worn yourself out to get to that go live, potentially doing other roles, not just the change role, then you're really going to struggle with the uplift part, which is the embedding of the solution, whether it be process, tech, policy, whatever that may be. So it's important to pace yourself and consciously pace yourself. because you will feel a sense of tension before a go live, and that's inevitable in projects. So be sure to do that. And then after all the dust is settled, after issues have been triaged, dealt with, managed, and from a change perspective, that follow-up communication has happened, then it's time to learn. And the change experience is that you may not need to gather lessons for executive stakeholders or for the project team even. It might be something you just do for yourself around what worked and what didn't, and something that you could leave as a bit of a legacy for others if they were ever to do a similar change. And that is where you actually get really good quality in your change approach for next time, so that you're not having to learn the lesson twice. And then the third lens I want to talk about is as a change leader. So a leader. Now, in the leader's shoes, their biggest constraint is time. So much going on. I have to engage my team. I have to get business as usual happening. I have to perform in that environment. I might be having team members leave. I have to recruit. Like everything, there's so much on a leader's plate nowadays. And if they haven't got the right skill sets or capability, which can happen because they've never been trained in doing all of this stuff to be as efficient as possible, then leaders are really genuinely time constrained. And so their experience of change is potentially overwhelm for those who haven't been trained in it. They may not be clear on what it is to be a change sponsor nor a project sponsor. And I, from a leadership perspective, maybe struggling, want to drive things with my team, but if there's a change coming in which impacts my team, I might need a lot of information to make sure that my team is briefed. As a leader, I have to deal with the blowback, even if the change is someone else's patch. And so therefore, I want to be able to have my questions funneled from somewhere. I need support from a change perspective, and I need help around if the change isn't as aligned to my values and it doesn't go with the way that I think strategically the organisation should go. I'm needing to compromise and somehow sell this to my team. So at the very least, I need tools to help me do that. That's why leadership briefing packs are really important. That's why creating the space for leaders is really important, because of that sentiment that sits with leaders, especially if the change isn't something that they've had a say in. And when it comes to executive leadership through to maybe senior leadership through to middle management, if you have many tiers in your organisation, then as a middle manager, I want some time, and I need time to be able to digest if it's a transformative change, what that means for my team. I then might need support to be able to take my team through it. And as I mentioned, I also need a feedback channel for myself, so that if I have questions, I can get the clarity that I can communicate to my team. And so can you sense the little bit of difference between if I'm a leader and I've generated the change, and so it's something that I want to do, and I'm going to talk with my team about it. I'm going to talk to them as individuals because all of them are different, but we have the collective view and vision for our team as to where we want to head. But if it's a change as a result of something else that someone else is introducing, then that's a little bit more difficult for me. And I need to have more information and time to unpack it for myself to then be able to communicate that to my team. I'm not sure where in the landscape people thought that leaders were superhuman and could absorb and translate change in a week for their team, especially if it's transformative. So the more time that you can give leaders and support that you can give leaders, so briefing them in, having a collective workshop with their peer group if there's a transformation at hand, is the bare minimum. And it isn't a presentation. It's actually, let's break out into groups. Let's collect the questions. Let's talk about how this might affect your area. And then let's ask the questions and have a really good, rigorous discussion. That type of engagement will always have a leader jump on board, because As a leader, remember, I'm time poor. So if I'm giving time, I just don't want to hear someone just talk at me about something that I've had nothing to do with, and yet I have to go and talk to my team about, because else I am going to run away from it in my team meeting and say, look, this has just been sent to me. This was just talked about at the session. You're probably going to have a lot of questions. I can't answer them. So you can see the lack of buy-in there versus, yes, we met, we had a half day offsite or a full day offsite. We unpacked what this means. I'm going to take you through it. And then as a result of, even if there's questions, I know where to go. I'll get those questions answered. I'll come back to you on that next week. A different level of confidence, right? Because of that respect and that time that's been taken. So 3 different lenses of a change and the different experience that each of these individuals have in an organisation with different pathways and different possibilities. Because that is a reality of change. There's different possibilities depending upon how you approach it as to the type of response, the type of resistance, the type of engagement that you get on a change, and the type of energy that you create with the change. So consider those and consider which path you're choosing to take through your approach with the change that you're rolling out currently. Think about the resilience that you would need, or the adaptability, the change adaptability that you would need as a really good, strong change leader, a strong change influencer, or even as a team member receiving the change. And the difference in the mindset you would need to have to be able to continue on your path and continue to move forward with engagement and with respect and with connection to those around you. I hope this gave you a few little insights as to the different lenses, the different situations and scenarios. Because if you haven't been a leader in an organisation, or if you haven't held a leadership role, because let's face it, people can be leaders regardless of their title. But the reality is if you're not a formal leader in an organisation, you probably don't realise how much can be on a leader's plate, or a high-performing leader's plate, let's put it that way. And so therefore, part of it, and it's not necessarily to give people leave passes in this, but if you're a change manager or a change facilitator and you're working with leaders, a bit of consideration around that is important. Same thing around currently everyone considering the different pressures that people are showing up to work with as a result of this global economy, of the fact of the war happening. There's just a lot going on in the world at the moment, and that can be weighing on people. And you never know what's happening in someone's home situation. And so I always just say it's important that you are aware of that, and that you do take a more supportive lens than a punitive one if someone's really struggling to keep up with the change that you're implementing. So I hope this gives you some reflection points, and I hope that you're taking care of yourself, your family, your situation, and that just remember, when things can get quite overwhelming, it's good to sit, be with your breath, be able to recenter, and just know that everyone does spin out of control, gets overwhelmed. That's just life. That can happen. And so cut yourself a break, and others as well, during this time. I hope this helps. If you're wanting to upskill in change, come to myvirtualchangemanager.com and sign up for our newsletter so you stay in touch with when we're doing our courses. Our courses are different because we do explore the who you are being when it comes to change, whether it be change leadership, change in projects, or everyday change. And just remember that change matters, because your people, your organisation, its purpose, your purpose, it all matters. I hope you have a great day.